You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Right up Meridian, baby.
All right, folks, welcome back to Right Up Meridian. We are stepping it up for the playoffs. We're trying to do something after every game. As you well know, Right Up Meridian is part of the Back Home Network. Back Home Network is sponsored by Homefield Apparel. Check them out. They just came out with, a whole set of Little 500 stuff, including a logo from like 1989 that I remember growing up in Bloomington having that shirt. So it's very cool. So check them out. Homefield Apparel. Use the promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your first purchase. All right, Tony. Game one. That was gross. That's about all. That's about all I have to say. That was gross. We were texting, and then we stopped texting because it was over very quickly.
Yeah, very, very ugly. Disappointing, but not, I guess, incredibly surprising start. Probably when I was making my predictions, probably didn't factor in enough how much like some playoff experience might have weighed heavily, especially in like game one. I think both teams came out pretty amped up. I think it was like 20-20 after the first quarter or something crazy like that. And then really when like the second units came in, that's where I thought the game kind of had some distance put between it. But yeah, so it was quite the ugly first game back in the playoffs for the Pacers. But fortunately, it seems as though Giannis will probably be out tomorrow as well. You still have a chance to take home court in this series if you can secure a victory tomorrow. So obviously not all is lost, but disappointing effort nonetheless.
Yeah, so I think there's negatives, obviously, and there are positives. So let's start with the negatives, and then we will go into the positives. Then we do have some listener questions to get to as well. I'll pull those up here in a little bit. So
we have listeners?
We have listeners, yes. We do, and they have questions. So it's awesome. It's a double win for everybody. But we'll start with some negatives, and we'll end on positives. At least we're looking into game two with a positive note. We're going to start here for a first negative is, they couldn't shoot. I mean, we looked so tentative. I think it's also a positive because I don't see us going 8 for 38 again from three. That's 21%. We were hovering around 14 or 15% for a while. And the thing is, it wasn't even, there were some bad shots, but a lot of those were just open shots. But what I will say is you had a lot of guys taking shots that don't normally take shots. So TJ McConnell has been awesome. We've been a big fan of his. He, where is it here? He took 3 3-pointers. That is not McConnell's shot. He's not been a good 3-point shooter this season. I was pulling it up. There's only been a couple of months where he took more than 3 threes. In February, he was 3 for 4 from 3. In December, he took 4 threes. In January, he took 7. March was a little bit of an outlier. He took 16. He's averaging 4 to 5 threes a month, not 3 a game. And I think this is the first concerning part is the Bucks were getting the Pacers to do a lot of things they didn't want to do. And McConnell was taking those because he was open a lot of times. There was one play in the third quarter where the ball was swinging. McConnell had it. He's like top of the key. And it's like Halliburton is wide open on the right-hand side, and McConnell doesn't look to swing it one more time. And I think that was just because the Bucks had done such a good job of denying all the different areas. And Halliburton's like, ball. And McConnell didn't look. McConnell took a 3. McConnell missed it. So that's the first thing that I would say that got me is a concerning thing is the Bucks were getting the Pacers to do a lot of things that the Pacers shouldn't be doing, but it's the only thing that the Bucks were allowing the Pacers to do. So I will start there. That was my number one concerning thing. Thoughts, and then what's your next number one concerning thing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The shooting was pretty putrid when you look at it. I mean, definitely not any disagreements there. And like you said, they actually hit a couple late ones that made it seem like that upped their percentages a little bit. So that was obviously a concern. In that TJ McConnell one, I think that was the second one he took in that possession, which is like had to be the first time he's ever done that in his career, taking 2 threes in one possession. Um, yeah, and that would seem like it was a fairly big play too. I think the Pacers had gotten it down to like 12 or something at that point, and so that was no fun. But that does kind of lead into he missed Tyrese Halliburton, which that contributed to Tyrese Halliburton only attempting 7 shots, and that's my main concern from last night is Halliburton put up a 4 for 7 stat line, 9 points, like he's an all-star, and we've discussed the merit of him being on the all NBA team, and obviously that has some financial ramifications for him as well. um but in a game like that, like, he's got to play to that level, and I know that the Bucks were doing things to try to take him away, but just wasn't nearly assertive enough in my opinion for what he needed to be, especially when I look at, like, the Bucks were trying to take away some Pascal Siakam stuff too, and he just asserted himself and put up a 36-point game. So my concern was that Halliburton had a week off. You'd hope that if there was some lingering stuff going on, he could at least rest that up, and he'd kind of come out swinging here in the playoffs. And we saw more of like the February March Halliburton than the October November December Halliburton, and the Pacers need the latter to play at their maximum capabilities, in my opinion, and just didn't get that last night.
Yeah, I'm gonna obviously agree with you on that. Halliburton only takes 3 3-pointers, is 1 for 3. Never in a world should he be taking the same number of threes as TJ McConnell. No knock on McConnell, it's just that is not his shot. And there were even, this is a fine line that Halliburton is going to have to figure out how he can thread, in that what makes him so special is he likes to, and I was listening to TJ McConnell, or sorry, Doug McDermott was on a lot of the McConnell and McDermott. Doug McDermott was on a podcast talking about Tyrese Halliburton. And one of the things he was saying was that, what makes Halliburton so special is he doesn't even care about getting the assist. He's fine with a hockey assist where he passes it to a guy who passes it to that guy. But there was a couple times last night where Halliburton, I think it was the second quarter or third quarter, but he had a drive and it was a wide open drive. And then he passed out for a 3. I think it was Shepherd in the corner. That's the right play. But this is where Halliburton is going to have to learn that, he's the engine of this team. And sometimes the right play is Halliburton taking the wrong shot, if that makes sense. And then that was an open layup, but like a 70% contested layup to kind of get things going is probably better than a wide open 3 when nobody's hitting anything. And sometimes, Halliburton is a little bit comfortable when he's getting, oh God, I'm zoning out here. When Beverly was face guarding him and not letting him get the ball, he would kind of just let Nembhard take it up, and then he would kind of let himself get taken out of the play. And that's something where a lot of time it works, and it's a great thing to have as a superstar, but at some point he has to assert himself. And him playing that kind of passive and not taking 2 or 3 shots a quarter and trying to get 5 or 7 points a quarter, it's going to have to change. He's got to find a way to be a little bit more selfish, honestly, I think.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. Like, you got to play with an edge, and it's not like you have to like dive into some deep depths to pull this out of Tyrese Halliburton. He did it earlier in the year in the play-in tournament. Like, he made a name for himself playing that way. And so I get that, he got injured and things happen with the injury, and we don't know if he's fully healthy or whatnot. So, I don't want to be too harsh or critical because I don't really know what's going on with his body. But at the same time, too, it's like, man, like, the franchise needs you in the biggest way, and they paid you for moments like this. And fortunately, it's one game, it's his first playoff game ever, and they could right that ship. But they're gonna go as he goes. And last night, because he's kind of like the Energizer Bunny too.
Yeah.
Like, he's dancing around, he's skipping, he's got a big smile on his face. Like, there was none of that last night really throughout the game, and I think the team feeds off that. He's their leader, so definitely gonna need a more inspired and assertive performance from Halliburton if the Pacers want to win this series.
So my other negative goes to a couple of questions that we had. So my other negative, and this is something you and I were texting about, was just the way that Carlisle was using this lineup, in that he was playing it very much like this was a January or February game on a back-to-back, where this is just the way we run our lineup. And, Halliburton comes out at the 6-minute mark, and then we're going to put the subs in, and it's something where our second unit has done really well throughout the season in games. The trouble here was our second unit wasn't playing against the Bucks second unit. It was playing against half the Bucks second unit, half the Bucks first unit. The Bucks had a tighter lineup, and they had a little bit more first unit guys in the lineup at all times. Carlisle went to the full hockey substitution, just went to a full second lineup. So two of the questions are from Ron Burgundy. What does a cut down rotation look like? The Pacers bench, while terrible today, has been a real strength for this team. Is it a small bench lineup with one of Halliburton or Siakam on the floor at all times, basically cutting the Jackson, Smith, McDermott all from the rotation? And then Jack Ryan Smith. These are all from our private Discord. If you want to get in on it, let us know, or email us at rightupmeridian@gmail.com. Shepherd was getting cooked. I don't get why he played so much in the first half. Halliburton needs to be more assertive next game. So with the Halliburton thing, I think this is something that Carlisle is going to have to look at. This is something, Carlisle is a little bit of an older school coach. This is kind of the way that coaches have done the playoffs in the past. Is we'll kind of throw a bunch of guys out there, see who works in game one, and then we'll tighten it up in game two. I hope to God that's what's happening, because I don't think we can play this many guys this much. Jalen Smith played 13 minutes. He did not look good. Ben Shepherd looked like a rookie, went 1 for 4 from 3. Those were all wide open looks. Stepped on the out of bounds line 2 different times. One of the times lost a Neesmith 3 that he made but didn't count. Shepherd looked really shaky, and that's where so when you talk about what a lineup like this looks like, I think honestly, it's and I didn't text you this, but when we got to like Isaiah Jackson being in, I'm like, Jesus, this is not good. Like if Isaiah Jackson's playing minutes in the middle,
Isaiah Jackson subbed in, and then they bring in McDermott to the table, and then he pulled him back.
Yeah, it's like McDermott's not the answer either. To me, a tightened up lineup looks like what we had with Obi Toppin. 13 minutes is fine. Maybe a little more of Obi Toppin. Jalen Smith wasn't great. He wasn't awful. I would cut Shepherd down a lot. Shepherd's a real 2 minutes in. How's he doing? If he looks bad, you take him out. McConnell, even at 18 minutes, I would trim that down a little bit too. There was a lot of TJ McConnell last night, and I love TJ McConnell, but it was pretty obvious the Bucks were going to give him whatever he wanted, and at some point, McConnell was probably shooting a little bit too much. And so I would say that, with Nembhard only having 30 minutes, and I'm looking at the stat sheet now, Miles Turner only 33 minutes, I would increase those. And I do agree with Burgundy that I think Siakam or Halliburton on the court at all times is probably something you have to look at. But I'm curious your thoughts on the rotation and how you would tighten it up.
Yeah, I definitely don't think Doug McDermott really needs minutes. With this group, especially playing against the Bucks, I just don't think the value he brings outweighs the negatives. I mean, I'm not a huge plus minus guy, but he played 7 minutes yesterday and was minus 17. Like that's crazy.
Well, and everybody on the bench had a negative plus minus.
Yeah, I think Miles Turner had a positive one, right?
Miles Turner was +2. That was the only one. But yeah, Toppin's -9. Smith is -13. McDermott's -17. Jackson's -4. It's tough to do in 2 minutes. McConnell's -13. Shepherd's negative. Just not great across the board. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think, as you noted, and I love saying Ron Burgundy because it's obviously just his username. Yes. But, as Ron said, one of those guys being on the court in Halliburton and Siakam makes a lot of sense, especially with just some of the firepower that the Bucks have. Mm-hmm. And those two guys are the guys that initiate offense for everybody else. I think McConnell does a nice job with that second unit of sometimes doing that, but they're just steadying forces that other guys feel comfortable with, I feel like, in creating offense for everybody else. And so I like that alignment of keeping one of those guys in. And then, like you said, I like Obi Toppin. I actually especially like him in this matchup and against some of these Bucks smaller lineups. So I wouldn't mind bumping him up a little bit. Like you said, Smith wasn't a huge fan of how he played. honestly, none of the bigs played particularly well. I know Miles had 17, but I thought he kind of cratered to Lopez sometimes and was kind
Yeah.
of throwing up some junk. So he could be better. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think you certainly can't play 11 guys, fairly significant minutes like Carlisle tried to do last night. And then when you look at the flip side of things for how the Bucks did it, I mean, they essentially played 8 and 7 guys played
Yep.
22 minutes or more. And that's kind of what you've got to do in the playoffs, especially when you're the underdog. Like, you're trying to gain advantages wherever you can. And if it's just how it is. Your 11th man isn't going to be as good as the third seeds 2, 3, and 4, or whatever the case may be. And so that, yeah, it just the
Well,
lineups
when I
yesterday
think
were
I
a
think
little
at one
perplexing.
point there was a lineup of McConnell, Shepard, Jalen Smith, Obi Toppin, and maybe like Neesmith or Turner. It's like that's just not a good lineup. Like you need,
I think that's how they opened the fourth quarter.
yeah,
Like down 12, opened the fourth quarter with that lineup, and the Bucks put it away.
yeah, and that's the way that we've coached most of the season. I think you and I were both assuming that Carlisle would tighten it up in the playoffs. They're going to have to do it because it's just that those lineups were not working. So anyway, yes. The other negative that I will say, and then I want to get to some positives. The other negative that I have is, well, you go first. I've taken 2 in a row. You go with one.
Oh no, I mean, in terms of like macro negatives, I think we kind of hit on all of mine that I
So,
saw. I mean,
so
I
the other
thought
one that I
that
have is then just not so much a micro, but a macro is, this is just, unfortunately, this is probably the way that we're going to remember this Pacers season of just a lot of missed opportunities. And we look back at all of the games against the Raptors and the Pistons that we didn't win, and we could have been a 4 or a 3 seed and had home court advantage. But just what an opportunity last night was, where you have a game against a Bucks team that is coming in, basically playing 500 basketball in their last 40 games. They're 3-9 in their last 10. They don't have Giannis. It's a team that lost as the 1 seed the year before. You could have put the fear of God into them by coming out and even just keeping it close and just seeing if they would crack. And you have a game where, again, you don't have a Giannis, and you're not even able to capitalize. You're not even able to really keep it a game for more than 13 minutes. And to me, that's a real lost opportunity that there's only so many games that Giannis isn't going to be playing in this series. And you just had one, and you were basically completely non-competitive. So to me, that's and we walk away with way more questions than the Bucks do. So to me, that's the other real negative, is you just lost a real opportunity to get some kind of ground in this series. Now you got to win 4 or 6 if you want to win this series.
yeah, and you kind of lost the narrative too of like, the Pacers are always kind of the
Yep.
underdog, and like everybody was kind of picking them. Like, the Pacers will win, and then like immediately you go out there and just get mollywopped. And I know that like Shaq and Charles Barkley were like, I'm not going to judge a team off of 1/2 or whatever the case may be. But that doesn't like matter really outside of the respect factor and all of that. But it's kind of like one of those things that, like, as a Pacers fan and certainly as a player, like, you kind of get annoyed with that. Like, you're always looked down upon, and you don't get the respect that you deserve, and yada yada yada. And then you kind of like got a little bit of notoriety. Some guys are vouching for, like, they think you're the better team, and then you just like go out there and piss down your leg. That was a little frustrating, and more like disappointing. It's like
Yeah.
one of those things like with your parents, like, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed, and it's like, oh, that's almost worse. Like that's
Well,
kind of how I
it's one of
felt
those
last night.
things where, and believe me, I still like this team. We're gonna get to positives. Why we're ending with positives, but it's one of those things. The Pacers have a teensy bit of this that I really don't like, is the team that talks a bunch of smack and then goes out and gets their ass kicked. And that's something that they need to be really careful with. That they've gotten a little chippy with the Bucks. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with, Tyrese doing the Dame time thing in the in-season tournament. I even think the Ballgate thing was totally stupid. But you've obviously gotten the Bucks' attention. Like we are on their radar. And while you're in the midst of getting your ass kicked, having Nembhard get kind of slappy with Dame, it's like, just stop. Like, to me, it's like, just stop trying to just go out and win. Hit some threes. Try not airballing threes. Like, to me, that's the worst, is when you're chippy and you suck. That's not a great place to be. So that's something that they, this rivalry, at least right now, it's not even, I mean, it's not a rivalry, but this chippiness is not helping the Pacers, because every time it's gotten a little chippy and physical, that's the way the Bucks want it to be, and the Bucks have more experience with that. They're a stronger, older, more veteran team. So to me, that's something where the Pacers just need to knock all that shit off and just focus on playing.
Yeah, I'm not one to want to poke Bobby Portis.
Yeah.
that dude, you know, he's a little crazy.
So let's look at positives. He's nuts. Yeah. And let's look at positives. Here are the positives in that. So one, I have like 5. So we'll kind of go back and forth. One is, I just don't see, and you've seen this throughout the Pacers this year. They've had games where they just can't hit the broad, not as bad as last night. Last night, they just looked tentative, scared. Their shots were way the hell off. But they've had nights where they don't shoot the ball well from 3 and they lose. There's not a lot of correlation. They normally snap it back pretty good. A lot of the shots they missed were really good shots. Miles missed a lot of open threes. Shepard's open threes were open. Nesmith had a lot of open looks. So it's not, again, the Bucks are doing a great job of forcing us to take shots we didn't want to take. But I would say 5 to 7 of those misses were really good looks that normally would go down. And if you say, this is a total ifs and buts game, trying to be positive on like a damn near 30-point loss that we had. But if you say that 4 or 5 of those wide open threes just go down, that's 12 to 15 points, which that makes the game 109 going into the stretch. So to me, that is one of the positives, is I don't see this Pacers team shooting 21% from 3 again in the future series, because not all of the shots were rushed or bad. Some of them were just, we could not hit open shots. So that's the one first positive takeaway that I take away from this, is it felt a little bitty like a black swan event that we just missed once we kind of got in the miss train, we couldn't see one go down. And then it's like Miles, who's been great from the top of the key threes, had a couple of top of the 3 keys that he like didn't even hit rim. And that's just so unlike Miles. That's my first positive.
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement. Like, and obviously if they do shoot 21% the rest of the series, it's gonna be a short series, you know?
Yeah.
So it's my positive is that they put Nesmith on Lillard in the second half, and looked like his length bothered Lillard more than what Nembhard was able to do to him. So for me, that was a positive. I mean, you held Lillard scoreless in the second half. Like, the fact that the Pacers had the leading scorer in the game is almost crazy, considering Lillard went for 35 in the first half. So I thought that was good. I'll like mix that with another one because it's kind of the same, but like the second half was just a better looking team. Like they certainly didn't look great in certain stretches, especially like to start the fourth quarter, but they battled back where, you know, the Bucks were up like 11 and the Pacers had the ball a couple different times where they could have cut it to single digits. Like, they didn't lay down and die. And partly I think that's because like their defense got their act together a little bit in guarding and shutting down Dame. So it's good momentum leading into game 2 that, you know, they might have found something that worked a little bit better than Nembhard on Dame.
I think that's a great call. That's part of one of my positives, which will lead into that. You know, I just don't think you're going to get a lot of Dame games where he goes 6 for 11 from 3.
Yeah, nuclear.
Scores 35 points in a half. They, you know, you saw them make some adjustments. They're able to stop that. And this is, Dame has that in him. The real question is, and if Dame can do, let me just get to this. The thing with Dame at his age is I'm not sure he can do this on 2 days rest 4 times in a row. Now, I know that you're going to get a couple more days between game 2 and game 3, but they're on 48-hour turnaround between game 1 and 2. And this is where the youth of the Pacers hopefully will take effect, that I just don't know if Dame's going to have that same kind of, you know, ability and length. And pump upness that he did with a week off. And Dame feels like, and if you look at him throughout the season, that's kind of what he's turned into, is that he can do it once a week. He can't do this 3-4 times a week. Because, I mean, dude's like 33, 34 years, somewhere in that range, 34 years old. So that's my other hope, is that the youth helps out, that the Bucks can't keep on doing this. Along those same lines, I was actually shocked to see this. When you look at the pace of play after the first game for everybody, the Pacers and the Bucks played the fastest paced game of any of the first round playoff series in 97. It still felt like the Pacers were playing the Bucks pace more than they wanted to play their pace. And the few times the Pacers were pushing the ball like that, you and I know at Pacers level, Halliburton hit Siakam for that just great, outlet. Siakam leaked out there, got him. Halliburton had a couple where he's pushing you see him kind of put like, let's go. I think that once we started getting our ass kicked and shots weren't going down, it turned much more into a half court game. I was surprised the pace was still as fast as it was, but I think that the Pacers need to push the pace even more, because the times that they did, I really felt it was like, man, the Pacers look younger and faster. And I know we got our ass kicked, so it's hard to say, but the few times you saw it, it's like, man, we are quicker and faster than this team. So I think that's it. And then, sorry, go with yours, and I have one that one more we have to hit. But those are my positives, is that if they pick up the pace, I think there's a spot for the Pacers to get a lot of transition points.
No, I'm in full agreement with that. Absolutely. I think that's a huge thing. I mean, my one kind of obvious positive is Pascal Siakam.
Yes, that's what I was going to go to. Yep.
36 points, 13 rebounds. It made timely shots, if there is such a thing. He would kind of stem the tide when the Bucks were going on those runs. He'd hit a nice little mid-range shot. He kept the Pacers in it early. He was the only one scoring in the first quarter, basically, for the Pacers. It kind of aggravates you, because you almost feel like you wasted such a great game with him. Without him, the Pacers definitely lose by 30, 35 points. Well,
I don't want to interrupt you, but I would just say that I don't feel like we wasted a good game, because, again, on the positive, as long as Giannis isn't in this lineup, I don't know who the hell the Bucks use to defend Siakam. They just don't have an option. They tried Middleton on him. Siakam's like, great, I'll just take a little step back and I can go over you. The Lopez was too slow. They tried Bobby Portis, but Siakam is too rangy and able to move around. Like they really don't have a stopper for Siakam. And this, again, from a positive point of view, if anybody else could have gotten going, it would have put the Bucks in a real world of hurt. Because if Halliburton starts going off, or if Nesmith's hitting his threes, or Turner is, then if you're the Bucks, like, what the hell do we do? We can't double Siakam. So I hear you, but I actually don't know if it was a wasted game, because I think Siakam could do this the entire series.
Yeah, no, and I hope so. That's the thing is, it was a great performance by him, but at the same time too, it's unsurprising the fact that this is a dude that has won an NBA championship playing at a high level.
I was thinking that.
And so
he knows what the playoffs are about.
Exactly. When you factor in everybody else in the Pacers who's all amped up, and they don't really can't get their wits about them really throughout the whole game. Then you've got this steadying pace guy that's just been there, done that, alongside most of the Bucks. Like it kind of isn't. It's why I said I almost feel like I underestimated like the value of playoff experience, especially in a game one for the Pacers on the road, because everybody else was kind of out of sorts, and Siakam just never seemed to be that guy throughout the whole entirety of the night last night.
And it's funny, I'm not picking on Miles at all, but I saw a quote from Miles being, just talking about how this is why experience matters, and it's on us, the guys who've been there before. And thinking like, Miles, you sucked as much as anybody else. Like he looked like he had never been in a playoff game. See, you are 100% right. Siakam is the only one of the Pacers who looked like he was ready for the moment. The other positive I will say is it's one game. Like I watched with my son last night. He's 11 and he was bummed, but I was like, James, it's one game, man. And I told him, like, a series doesn't start until the road team wins a game. And after I was like, he's kind of going to bed, and I was like, welcome to the playoffs, man. This is playoff basketball. You cannot get too high. You cannot get too low. you have a coach in Carlisle who has been here, done that. I'm not sure if he's had an ass kicking in a game one like this before, but I'm sure he's had bad. I'm not looking through the Carlisle playoff tree here and every single record, but he's been coaching long enough. He's been down in series before, so he theoretically should know the right and wrong buttons to push. All that said, Pacers have to win some games here at some point, but if the Pacers can, just put it out of their mind. All right, we had our shit game. It is what it is. We're moving on. If they come back and they play well in game 2, if they win, the narrative is going to change really quickly, because depending on how they can win game 2, again, it's giving them a win. I'm assuming a team that couldn't get within 30 of the Bucks, but I mean, I know they lost by 15, but you know what I mean. If they're able to win game 2, the narrative of this series changes on a dime, because suddenly now, all right, now the Bucks, do they need to bring Giannis back? You're going back to Indy. You're playing back-to-back games again. The Bucks are an older team. Now some of that creep, things set in. It's like you go to Indy, if the crowd's nuts, which I think it will be, Indy gets a lead in game 3 or they take it. Suddenly it's like Indy can be up 2-1 with a 48-hour turnaround, where Indy can be up 3-1 going back to Milwaukee, and now they're getting tied up. Like, this can change really quickly, but it starts on Tuesday night. And I think that's the other positive is, all hope is not lost until we get to probably Friday at, 7:45 p.m. We'll really know. But I think that you can really still put the Bucks on their heels if you come out and really push the pace and the Pacers win the game on Tuesday. I do think the narrative could quickly be, man, the Bucks are good, but are they too old to put together 4 games in a 2-week period to win a series? So that's my other positive.
Yeah. No, I think you're spot on with that. And a couple things on that. Number one is every single home team won game 1, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Not a single road team won game 1 in the NBA. So, the Pacers are in line with everybody else, in the league as it currently stands. But alongside that, something that is intriguing to me is, if, let's say, last week somebody's like, all right, the Pacers are going to go 1-1 next week. Which game do you want them to lose? Which one do you want them to win? Obviously, this is easy for me to say now, but I think winning game 2 and getting the momentum coming back home, and I think it just shifts kind of how you feel about the series if you win game 2 heading home than if you won game 1 and then the Bucks made some tweaks and changes in one game 2 and then possibly getting Giannis back for game 3. Like, if the Pacers we're gonna go 1-1, I guess, this scenario that's played out where, like, you kind of get punched in the mouth, welcome to the playoffs, lose game 1, and then if you can adjust, win game 2 and maybe in a more handily fashion, and it's like, oh yeah, this is what we did to this team all regular season, kind of get your mojo back, and then you're coming back home for what, you and I both think will be a raucous 5:30 p.m. crowd. It's
Yeah.
I think, I would have signed up for that a week ago.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I don't know, outside of Lillard going nuclear, Middleton had a quiet 23, Portis had 15, Lopez had 11, but a lot of those were coming when I think the Pacers were in kind of shell shock mode in some of those runs the Bucks were going on. Can't take it away from the Bucks. They made those runs, but, some of these numbers are a little bit janky when a team is up by 30. And this is unfortunately a bit of a negative. Pacers made a comeback, but I also wonder, the Bucks probably lose some focus when you're up 30. So some of these numbers aren't great. But I would say, again, I'm not sure Lillard's going to continue this pace. He obviously didn't, because he didn't do it in the second half. So I agree. I think if you could win game 2, you've still gone 1-1 in the first 2, which is exactly what we both thought you needed to do. You probably weren't going to go 2-0, and you're definitely not now, because one game is already over. So you go 1-1. I think I'm trying to keep it positive here on the end. The only thing that I would say is that if something similar happens in game 2 where Lillard goes off at some point, or Middleton goes nuts, or you're just not able to keep it, and you can still lose game 2 and not all hope is lost. But I don't think the Pacers are now in a spot where they can lose by double digits in game 2 and not be at a point where our next podcast is probably sounding some alarms about this series. I think the Pacers can come home down 0-2 but game 2 has to be closer. You can't just get punched in the mouth back-to-back games.
Totally agree. Because, yeah, that's like you said. Then you start asking questions. Is like, is this team built for a playoff series, or do they have the grit or whatever the case may be, to kind of be ready for that. And just a side note, here's why I'm not a huge fan of plus minus. Dame was actually a negative plus minus last night. He's a minus
That's
6.
a great call. Yeah, no, it's like, and he was definitely a plus for that game. Yeah. That's a great call. Yeah. That alone should be the reason why plus minus is not a perfect stat. Sorry, Dame, you didn't do enough, man. Sorry, bro.
Just getting ripped in the locker room, and you were negative 6. How could you?
We're sitting Dame for game 2. He's not even starting. I guess the other positive I'll say is something, we love to talk contracts and what's going to happen in the offseason on this podcast. I feel much better about the future, super max or max deal we're going to give to Pascal Siakam. So seeing him step up in the playoffs, knowing that he played 40 minutes, and I'm not at all concerned that he can't play another 40 and put up another 36. It does make me feel a lot better. Had it been the other way around, had he had like Neesmith's stat line of going 2 for 9 with 7 points, I would also be walking away being like, oh my God, I do not want to give this guy $40 million this offseason. Looking at that, I feel very confident, and it's like, all right, we know we have a playoff caliber player here that we need. So I feel better about that as well.
Certainly. I mean, how could you not, at this point? Like he's done everything you would want him to do as a member of this franchise. He's embraced it. I follow him on Instagram. He's always posting about the city and how much fun he's having with the Pacers and stuff. And then he goes out on the floor and produces when the lights are brightest. Like just like you, I'm very comfortable in that. Like the future with him is positive for the Pacers.
So what's your prediction for game 2? I'm not in a good spot as somebody who bet the Pacers to win and then bet them at plus 4.5 and then plus 13.5. I lost all of the bets, and I thought the 13 was like, oh man, we're down by like 20 at the time. Like there's no way that okay, yeah, that's why FanDuel is doing very well for themselves. So I'm maybe not the best one to ask. What do you think for game 2?
Yeah, I'm the one that predicted they'd be up 2-0 too, so I'm not in a great spot either. I'll double down though. I do think they win game 2, primarily for the reasons we just discussed. It was a scenario where not only was it their worst offensive output of the season, as their 84th game they played, because you had the championship of the playing game as well, or not the play-in, the in-season tournament. Right. Worst offensive output, had Damian Lillard go, absolutely nuclear. And, it was just a series of unfortunate events that all compounded themselves. And they lost. But I think those things can get righted. And the Pacers throughout this season have showcased that, like, that's never been a trend for them. You've never been like, damn, man, like the Pacers offense sucks. That hasn't really been a trend ever this season. So I get the playoffs are a different beast or a different animal. And I still go back to, I know that, we had frustrations with some of the lineups and stuff yesterday. I still go back to, I would rather have Rick Carlisle than Doc Rivers as my coach in this series. As you mentioned, Rick Carlisle's done this a long time, as has Rivers, but I feel good about adjustments being made, shoring things up, and like you said, not getting too high or too low, and kind of feeling out what some of these guys could do in game 1, and then hopefully tightening things up. So I'm going to go with a Pacers victory by 6. Let's say 114-108.
Okay. I also I'll go ahead and just spoil it now. I think I'm gonna call wins for the next two games. Even if we lose game 2, I still think the Pacers are gonna win game 3. But yeah, you look at again, you look at the players that the Bucks have. It's an older team, and you look at the players the Pacers have. It's a young no kidding. It's a younger team, but the guys who struggle, even the guys off the bench, Toppin and Jalen Smith and Shepard they're all young players. Even McConnell is younger than a lot of the Bucks players. So this is where I do think these back-to-back 48-hour turnarounds, it's going to be hard, I think, for the Bucks to keep that level of intensity, to come out with that kind of quickness and passion. It's going to be hard, I think, for the fans to come back and be super fired up. They probably think they have this well in the bag now. I agree for all the things that we talked about on the positive side. And, you know, I think that for somebody like Halliburton, this matters, because for a guy who he's made it very clear how much he wants to win. He wants to be one of those elite players. If he comes out, and I just don't know what was going on in game one. I'm not sure why he was so passive. It might have just been too much. It might have just been suddenly, it's like, oh my God, we're at halftime. I haven't done anything. Like, it's just, you and I have never played in a playoff game, never will. So it's just very possible that it's just that's kind of what happens.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right there. I see Gainbridge in the background. You might still get some shots up. So I have a feel, you know, if Halliburton is the guy that we hope and think he is, he's going to respond at some point in this series. Because if the Pacers get swept or lose 4-1 in this kind of fashion, everything about him is going to take a hit. Like, suddenly it's going to be like, all right, it's a great story in November. The guy sucks in the playoffs. And it's like, all right, then you got to change that narrative. And I think he understands what's at stake here. They don't need to win the series, but they've got to be more competitive. And I think you're going to see a much different Pacers team. And I do think there are a lot of things they can exploit against the Bucks. So, long story said, I think they're going to win. And I could see them winning like 124 to 107 or something. I could see them just starting to really pour it on at the end, and the Bucks looking a little bit old and tired.
I like where your head's at. I'm going to go with your theory.
Yeah.
I would love a 17-point, like, kind of easy victory heading into this Friday, I should say.
I hope so.
But yeah, I think we're on the same page, because I think we've both watched almost every single Pacers game this season.
Yeah.
And we both know that team last night was not the Pacers of the 2023-24 season. Like, it just didn't look like them. Like, there's a couple of times they passed up open threes for contested twos. I thought I was watching IU and not the pay. Like, it was like uncharacteristic things too that didn't make a lot of sense. That I think you watch the film, you understand pretty quickly. Like, yeah, we were out of character, and you right those wrongs pretty quickly.
Well, and even I'm just going back into recent, and we'll wrap up here in a sec. Even recent history, you know, they lost to the Bulls. They're at Chicago. They lost 125-99 to a crappy Bulls team. And then 2 days later, they come back home and beat the Lakers 109-90. And they've had, this is, you know, you and I have both watched a lot of Pacers games. We do a podcast about it. They've had stinkers in there. You know, they lost to the Pelicans 129-102. I was at that game. That was probably the only other time I saw them look this bad was when I went with my son. So sorry, James. Like, I'm giving you bad basketball mojo all over the place. Maybe not the best game example, because they went ahead and lost 2 days later to the Spurs, but you know, they came back and they beat the Mavs in a kind of a must-win game, putting up 137. They lost to the Timberwolves. That was also a game where Anthony Edwards went wild at the end. And they beat the Magic and they beat the Thunder back-to-back games after that. So they went, you know, 3 of 4 after losing to the Pelicans and the Spurs. They've had these games where they will throw up stinkers, and it just happens. And it doesn't seem to be a lot of corollary where suddenly they just have 3 or 4 stinkers in a row. It's normally the norm. They have a stinker, it's out, and they can come back and kind of go back to what they've normally done. So let's hope that's the case. We'll leave it there. Tony, as always, thanks for joining us. And for everybody out there, thank you for listening. For those in the Discord, thank you for the questions. Please send them in. You can also email them, rightupmeridian@gmail.com. And we'll talk to you guys after game 2. And hopefully talking about 1-1 and the Pacers coming back to Gainbridge. So, for Right Up Meridian, this is Scott signing off.